Welcome, beautiful damsels. The loudest red flags are the ones we refuse to see. In a world where modern men are constantly rebranding themselves as alphas, sigmas, or whatever Greek letter is trending this week, one thing remains painfully true. Actions still speak louder than aesthetics. But what happens when those actions are so subtle, so cleverly masked, that we don't notice them until we're knee-deep in regret? Here's a fact to chew on. Psychologists say it takes an average of 6 months for someone's true character to fully reveal itself in a relationship. 6 months. That's 2 seasons of red flags parading as quirks. By the time you see the real picture, you're probably emotionally invested, slightly confused, and maybe even Googling, can people change? So today we're exposing the hidden red flags of modern men, the ones you might laugh off at first, or worse, find charmingly quirky. Spoiler alert, they're not. Whether it's the guy who quotes Nietzsche but lives with his mom or the one who talks about hustling while asking to split a $4 coffee, we're peeling back the layers and getting real. Trust me, this isn't about man-bashing. It's about spotting the signs before they turn into regrets. And hey, if you think you're immune, stick around. You might just realize the red flag is waving closer than you thought. Let's dive in. Number 1. Serial self-improvement without results. A man who constantly talks about self-improvement but has nothing to show for it is a walking contradiction. He's the guy who knows every podcast, every motivational guru, every hack for success, but his life doesn't reflect any of it. He's always working on himself, yet he's in the same place he was a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe even 5. His goals are vague, his plans are endless, and his results are non-existent. The problem isn't that he's trying, it's that he's using the idea of trying as a shield. He hides behind buzzwords like growth and mindset, but he's not actually growing. He's memorized the language of success, but he's allergic to the action it requires. It's performative, it's empty, and worst of all, it's contagious, because the longer you're around someone like this, the easier it is to lower your standards, to start believing effort without results is enough. This man will often paint himself as misunderstood, as someone who's just taking his time or waiting for the right moment. But the truth is, he's afraid. Afraid of failure, afraid of accountability, afraid of doing the hard, unglamorous work that real improvement demands. And here's the kicker. He doesn't even realize it. To him, the constant cycle of planning and talking feels like progress. What's worse is that he'll expect praise for this illusion of effort. He wants recognition for reading the books, watching the videos, or manifesting his dream life. But when it comes to the real work, the consistency, the discipline, the unsexy grind, he's nowhere to be found. If a man's self-improvement only exists in theory, he's not evolving. He's stagnant, and sooner or later that stagnation will pull everything and everyone around him down. Number 2. Overcompensation with hypermasculinity. A man who constantly feels the need to assert his masculinity in loud, over-the-top ways isn't exuding strength, he's broadcasting insecurity. Whether it's excessive aggression, constant dominance games, or mocking anything perceived as soft, this behavior reeks of overcompensation. It's not confidence, it's camouflage. Beneath the tough guy exterior often lies someone who is terrified of being vulnerable, judged, or seen as less than by others. This type of hypermasculinity often manifests in predictable ways: unnecessary bravado, disdain for emotions, and a relentless need to prove his manhood. He might scoff at men who cry, belittle women for being too emotional, or view kindness as weakness. But here's the truth. These aren't signs of strength. They're symptoms of a fragile ego that equates power with control and self-worth with dominance. What makes this worse is that hypermasculinity doesn't just harm the man exhibiting it. It poisons his relationships and his environment. It creates a space where emotional connection is stifled, empathy is dismissed, and everyone is walking on eggshells to avoid bruising his fragile sense of self. And the irony? True strength lies in balance. A man who's genuinely secure doesn't need to roar to prove he's a lion. The most telling part is how rigid hypermasculine men are in their thinking. Anything outside their narrow definition of manhood is a threat. They ridicule hobbies, demean careers, or criticize lifestyles that don't align with their rigid ideals. But if you dig deeper, you'll often find envy, fear, or an inability to embrace their own complexity. Masculinity isn't about dominance or suppression, it's about character. And any man who can only define himself through aggression and disdain for softness isn't as strong as he wants the world to believe. Number 3. Excessive social media performances. A man who turns his social media into a stage for constant performances isn't living for himself, he's living for likes. If every post is a flex, a motivational caption, or an overly polished selfie, it's not just a red flag, it's a flashing neon sign screaming, "Validation needed." This kind of man carefully curates his online persona to project a version of himself he thinks the world will admire. Whether it's gym photos with captions like, "The grind never stops," or pictures of luxury items with no context, the goal is always the same: attention. But the more someone feels the need to broadcast their life, the emptier it often is behind the scenes. The image he's selling isn't just a mask, it's a plea for approval. What's most telling is the disconnect between what he posts and who he really is. While his social media might show a confident, successful, and motivated man, his real life might tell a different story. Maybe he's drowning in debt from all those flashy purchases. Maybe he's deeply insecure about his appearance despite the endless selfies. Or maybe, behind the motivational posts, he's struggling with the very things he claims to have conquered. The issue isn't the act of posting, it's the intent behind it. Genuine connection isn't his priority. He's not sharing his life to inspire or connect. He's performing for applause. Relationships with men like this can feel one-sided because they're so consumed with feeding their online persona that there's little room for anything or anyone else. A man obsessed with how he appears online often struggles to be authentic offline. And if his primary source of fulfillment is a string of digital likes, it's worth asking what's missing in the real world. Number 4. Fear of being outshined by others. A man who feels threatened by the success of others, whether it's his friends, co-workers, or partner, isn't driven by ambition. He's consumed by insecurity. Instead of celebrating the accomplishments of those around him, he views them as a personal attack, as if someone else's success somehow diminishes his worth. This mindset doesn't just make him a bad team player, it makes him toxic to be around. When this man sees a friend excel in their career or a partner thrive in their goals, his instinct isn't pride or encouragement, it's jealousy. He might downplay their achievements, subtly criticize them, or shift the focus back to himself. And when the person outshining him is a woman, especially his partner, that insecurity can become even more pronounced. He might frame it as traditional values or claim he just wants balance, but underneath, it's often a fragile ego struggling to cope with not being the center of attention. This kind of man isn't a partner, he's a competitor. He doesn't see relationships as a space to grow together. He sees them as a silent contest where he always needs to come out on top. His fear of being outshined stifles the people around him, making them feel as though they need to shrink themselves to keep the peace. But shrinking isn't the solution, it's enabling. True leaders and secure men understand that success isn't a zero-sum game. They recognize that someone else's win doesn't take away from their own potential. But a man who constantly feels overshadowed isn't looking to lead or support, he's looking for control. If his worth depends on always being the biggest fish in the pond, he'll never stop dragging others down to keep himself afloat. Number 5. Disguised narcissism as high standards. There's nothing wrong with having high standards unless those standards are a smokescreen for narcissism. Some men disguise their inflated egos under the guise of being selective or refined. But in reality, their so-called high standards are just excuses to constantly criticize, control, and dismiss others. It's not about excellence, it's about power. This type of man claims he's hard to impress because he's demanding the best. But scratch the surface and you'll see he's not looking for quality. He's looking for perfection on his terms. Whether it's in relationships, friendships, or work, nothing and no one is ever good enough. He'll nitpick your appearance, your goals, your decisions, always finding subtle ways to remind you that you don't measure up to his impossible expectations. What makes this even more insidious is how he frames it. He'll tell you he's just being honest or that he knows his worth, but his feedback often lacks any real substance. Instead of constructive criticism, it's thinly veiled judgment, designed to keep you on edge and constantly striving for his approval. And the truth? That approval is never coming. This behavior stems from an inability to see others as equals. He elevates himself by devaluing those around him, cloaking his arrogance in the language of self-improvement and ambition. But the reality is, his dissatisfaction isn't about you or anyone else. It's a reflection of his own insecurities. A man with genuinely high standards will inspire and uplift those around him, pushing for growth and supporting you along the way. But a man who uses standards as a weapon, he's not looking for greatness. He's looking for control. And no matter how hard you try, you'll never meet the expectations he sets because he doesn't want you to. Number 6, over-reliance on potential as an excuse. When a man leans heavily on his potential as his defining trait, it's a glaring red flag. Sure, ambition is attractive, but ambition without action is just a fantasy dressed up as a plan. If his biggest selling point is what he could become someday rather than what he's doing right now, it's time to stop buying into the hype. This kind of man is skilled at painting a vision of his future self, the thriving entrepreneur, the dedicated partner, the man who just needs a little more time to get there. He talks endlessly about his dreams, his goals, and the empire he's building. The problem? The foundation of that empire is nothing but talk. There's no follow-through, no visible progress, and often no real plan beyond vague ideas. He might charm you with promises of what life will look like once things take off. But if you look closely, his current reality often contradicts his future projections. Maybe he's stuck in the same dead-end habits, procrastinating on taking the first step, or blaming external circumstances for why he hasn't moved forward. Whatever the excuse, the gap between his dreams and his actions only grows wider. What's worse, this over-reliance on potential becomes a shield against accountability. He'll deflect criticism with lines like, "You just don't see my vision," or "I'm a work in progress." But progress is visible. It's messy, imperfect, and real. If there's no evidence of effort, he's not in love with the process of becoming better. He's in love with the idea of being better. True potential is backed by work, discipline, and tangible steps forward. If he's more invested in selling his dream than living it, you're not dealing with a man on the rise. You're dealing with someone content to live in his own delusions. Number 7, intellectual laziness disguised as stoicism. Some men mistake emotional detachment and disinterest for stoicism, but the truth is, it's not wisdom or strength. It's intellectual laziness. They hide behind phrases like, "I don't care," or "it doesn't bother me," to avoid engaging with complex ideas, relationships, or conflicts. This isn't the disciplined resilience of a true stoic. It's apathy dressed up as depth. Real stoicism is about mastering one's emotions, maintaining balance, and focusing on what you can control. It's a mindset rooted in introspection and thoughtful action. But these men have twisted the concept, using it as a shield to dodge discomfort or accountability. Instead of thoughtfully addressing issues, they shut down, feigning indifference to things that should matter. This intellectual laziness shows up in countless ways. They dismiss conversations about emotions, calling them pointless. They refuse to confront personal growth or relationship challenges, labeling them as drama. They avoid discussing societal or ethical issues, claiming it's not their problem. But their refusal to engage isn't a sign of control, it's a refusal to step out of their comfort zone. What makes this behavior even more frustrating is the smugness that often accompanies it. They'll act as though their indifference makes them superior, as if caring about something or someone is a weakness. In reality, their avoidance isn't strength, it's fear. Fear of being vulnerable, of being wrong, or of having to put in the work to think critically or empathize deeply. True stoicism demands discipline, humility, and effort. It's about engaging with the world thoughtfully, not withdrawing from it entirely. A man who uses stoicism as an excuse for laziness isn't emotionally strong. He's just running from the complexities of life while pretending to rise above them. Number 8, living for male validation, not authenticity. A man who lives for male validation, constantly seeking approval from his peers or trying to fit into a rigid bro code, is often disconnected from his own identity. His decisions, what he wears, how he speaks, what he values, are less about who he truly is and more about what will earn him a nod of approval from other men. This isn't confidence, it's conformity disguised as camaraderie. This type of man thrives on groupthink. He won't challenge his friends' toxic behaviors, won't admit he likes something that might be deemed uncool, and certainly won't step out of the box for fear of being judged. Whether it's pretending to love sports he doesn't care about, adopting a tough guy persona, or hiding his emotions, his life becomes a performance for his peers. The irony is, this kind of validation is fleeting. Male approval is often conditional, based on how well he adheres to the unspoken rules of masculinity. Be tough, be dominant, don't show vulnerability. If he steps out of line, the very group he's trying to impress might turn on him. Instead of finding a supportive brotherhood, he's stuck in a fragile ecosystem of judgment and competition. What makes this worse is how it affects his relationships. A man who lives for male validation struggles to connect authentically with others, especially women. He might dismiss their opinions, prioritize his friends over his partner, or shy away from any behavior that might be seen as soft. The result? A life ruled by fear, fear of rejection, fear of being different, fear of being authentic. True strength comes from self-awareness and authenticity. A man who knows who he is doesn't need validation from anyone, let alone a group that thrives on outdated notions of what masculinity should be. Number 9. Fixation on status symbols. A man who constantly flaunts flashy cars, luxury brands, or name drops at every opportunity isn't projecting success. He's hiding his insecurity behind material possessions. The more he emphasizes external symbols of wealth or status, the clearer it becomes that his sense of self-worth is entirely dependent on how others perceive him. The truth is, when someone is more concerned with showing off what they have than who they are, it's a major red flag. This behavior is often a cover-up for deeper issues. Instead of building real substance, genuine relationships, skills, or personal growth, he's focused on collecting items that act as a temporary ego boost. A designer watch, an expensive car, or a high-end vacation might impress for a moment, but these things don't define the person underneath. They are simply distractions, markers of a man who is more concerned with appearing successful than actually being successful. The problem with living for status symbols is that it's a never-ending race. What's flashy today is tomorrow's old news, and the pursuit of validation through material possessions can quickly become hollow and exhausting. When someone's identity is wrapped up in what they own or who they know, they are often left empty when the external validation fades. Additionally, this fixation can create a toxic dynamic in relationships. If a man is constantly comparing himself to others or trying to one-up those around him, it becomes hard for genuine connections to form. The people around him start to feel like accessories, props in his quest for validation rather than true partners or friends. True self-worth isn't about what you have, it's about who you are. A man who derives his identity from material objects and status is not building anything of lasting value. The real question is, when the flashiness fades, what's left behind? Number 10. The oversimplified red pill mindset. A man who clings to the oversimplified red pill mindset isn't embracing enlightenment. He's embracing an echo chamber of narrow, one-dimensional thinking. This ideology, often driven by bitterness or frustration, paints women and relationships in black and white terms, with little room for nuance or complexity. It's the easy way out, relying on rigid rules and simplistic explanations to avoid engaging with the real, messy, beautiful realities of human relationships. At its core, the red pill mindset claims to offer a truth about the dynamics between men and women, but in reality, it reflects a deep unwillingness to think critically or challenge preconceived notions. A man who buys into this ideology is often someone who has been hurt, disillusioned, or failed in relationships, and instead of learning from his experiences, he chooses to blame the opposite sex, society, or a specific set of rules. This mindset can breed resentment, bitterness, and a total disregard for the uniqueness of each person and relationship. The problem with this thinking is that it erases all the gray areas that make relationships complex and worth navigating. It disregards mutual respect, individual growth, and emotional intelligence in favor of simplifying human dynamics into an easy-to-digest narrative. A woman is either a queen to be elevated or a red flag to be avoided. There's no room for the nuanced, messy truth that people are individuals capable of growth, mistakes, and change. In essence, the red pill isn't about wisdom or personal growth. It's a refusal to embrace complexity, a rejection of empathy, and an escape from the difficult work of truly understanding oneself and others. A man trapped in this mindset isn't evolving. He's stuck in a cycle of resentment and oversimplification, closing himself off from the rich, multifaceted experiences that come with meaningful connections. At the end of the day, the biggest red flags in modern men aren't always the loud, obvious ones. They're often the subtle, insidious behaviors that go unnoticed until they've already taken root. Whether it's living in the shadow of unfulfilled potential, hiding behind a false mask of stoicism, or constantly seeking validation through status and ideologies, these red flags aren't just about what's wrong in the moment. They're signs of a deeper lack of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and authenticity. Men who live for external approval or hide behind masks of high standards or masculine ideals aren't growing. They're avoiding growth. They're hiding from vulnerability. And in doing so, they miss out on the rich, fulfilling relationships that come from real connection and mutual respect. True strength doesn't come from flashy displays or rigid, one-dimensional beliefs. It comes from self-awareness, emotional maturity, and a willingness to evolve. So the next time you encounter someone who seems to fit these patterns, don't just dismiss them. Dig deeper. Ask yourself whether you're seeing the person they want to be or the person they truly are. And remember, growth, real growth, isn't about impressing others with what you have or what you say. It's about who you are when no one's looking, when the filters come off, and when the performance ends. Only then can a man begin to step into his full potential. If you found this discussion eye-opening and thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, no-nonsense insights. Hit that like button if you agree. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your perspective. And if you think this message might resonate with someone else, share it. Let's spread awareness and spark meaningful conversations. Thanks for watching, and remember, growth starts with awareness. Keep evolving. Thanks, damsels, for tuning in. See you in the next vid. Bye and stay blessed.